what's up, everybody? We're back for another week of football talk. I'm your host, Zach, joined by my co-host, Ryan. If you guys enjoy the show, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. The information scrolling right there at the bottom of the page. We appreciate you guys tuning in at all times. We got a great show for you today. As of yesterday, every single NFL team has reported to training camp. That's got to make you feel excited. And you see over there to my other side, Mr. Kyler Murray himself. Ryan, how you doing tonight?
Zach, we are 43 days away from the kickoff of the NFL season. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. A special shout out to super fans Sean and Matt. I know you're out there listening because I pester you constantly at work to listen, so thank you. You know what else we're counting down to? We are 200 days away from the Super Bowl. Zach, do you know who won't be playing in the Super Bowl this year? Kyler Murray.
That's a great point. That is a great point because in order to get to the Super Bowl, you need to be able to do your homework. I know once you think you're out of high school and college that the homework stops, but if you want to be the best of the best, you need to be able to bring your A game week in and week out. And in order to do that, you got to do your homework. You got to prepare. One of the best things about the Patriots and their well-run franchise when Tom Brady was there, even when Tom Brady's not there with Bill Belichick at the helm, that's one thing Tom Brady carried to Tampa Bay is the attention to detail. And I know, a guy like Kyler Murray is very talented, but you need to be more than talent. It's what you're doing Monday through Saturday leading up to that Sunday. And obviously, there's different game weeks where you're playing on Thursday and Saturday, but you get the point. It's what you're doing between the days of your game days. That's what matters just as much as what you're doing on game day. And obviously, what you're referring to, Ryan, is the fact that they put in the Kyler Murray contract a clause that specifically states you must do 4 hours of independent study a week on your own, Kyler Murray, with no distractions. So you can't be on the phone. You can't be playing your video games you love to do so much. You can't have the TV on in the background. So it's not like you're going to sit there and watch Scarface while, looking at your tablet and running over plays or anything. You're not going to be playing Call of Duty while looking over plays and checking blitz packages and all that stuff. In the contract itself, it says 4 hours of independent study outside of your typical 9 to 5, whatever you want to call it, football job. You got to do your 4 hours on your own. And I got to ask you, Ryan, how the hell did we end up at this point where it has to be put in your contract or we can void it?
Man, Zach, if you want to break this down, just looking at the contract, the reason you put a clause in the contract that states that your money is tied to you having that independent study, it's because we can't trust you to do it on your own. And the reason we can't trust you is because you're a quarterback who, even over the course of the past 5 months, has simply proved that you're immature. You're more about your brand and your individual attention than you are the team. We have to cater to you. And even if you just think back to who Kyler Murray was when he entered the NFL draft, he's not ill in on football. I might play baseball. What's going to be easier for me? What's going to get me the most money? What cuts into my video game time the least? The NFL is littered with stories of players that didn't study enough, and those stories never end with, and then they went on to win the Super Bowl. Kyler Murray is being told you have to study these 4 hours because you're not, and because you need to. It's not superfluous. Tom Brady doesn't need to be told to study. Peyton Manning never had to be told to study. I personally haven't been through this, but when you have a child and you tell them, hey, the first time, hey, I need you to do something, and they say no, it's okay. I need you to do this. Maybe the second time you get a little serious. The third time I'm taking away this toy. Do this. Kyler Murray's having his toys taken away.
I'm laughing so hard because it's actually true. So we have a little one. She's turning 3 in 2 days, and we're teaching her how to pick up her own toys. If you make the mess, you can clean the mess. And it sometimes gets to the point. You ask her a couple of times. You'll even say, "Hey, I'll help you. I'll help you pick up those toys." Kyler Murray will help you study. We'll help you do some game tape, but we're also going to provide game tape that we would like you to check out outside of your typical workday here in the NFL. Same thing with Serenity. Sometimes we have to say, hey, if you don't want these toys picked up, I'll help you pick them up. But when I pick them up, they're going in the garbage. So you better hurry up and pick them up before me. So the fact that they had to put this in the contract and then somehow, quote unquote, somehow it got leaked to the media is by far the most hilarious thing because it basically puts pressure on Kyler Murray to do the damn job he should be doing all along. If this is truly a passion of yours, you should want to be doing everything you can to be the best. And I'm reminded of a quote, and I forget if it's New York Times or New York Post. He did an interview a year or two ago, and he said, due to my cognizant, I don't really need to study game film because I can see it before it happens. You know who also seen it before it happened? Johnny Manziel. You know who also seen it before it happened? Oh, I don't know, Michael Vick. These guys, Jamarcus Russell, they relied on their talent so much. They didn't understand they needed to do the day in and day out. I'm reminded of one of the greatest all-time busts in NFL history, not named Jamarcus Russell. I am reminded of Ryan Leaf, who has since taken responsibility for the reason that he did not work out in the NFL. And he has reminded the world that it's not just what you do on Sunday. It's not just the talent that you bring to your team. You have to do those little things. You have to do the day ins and day outs and be dedicated to your craft. Ryan Leaf said, if I understood what I needed to do and what it took to be in the NFL, I wouldn't have been that bust. I wouldn't have been in and out of the league as quickly as I did. That's Ryan Leaf. We've heard Mike Vick say, if I just studied game film and understood defenses a little better and read defenses better, I probably would have had a Super Bowl ring with my talent and then adding that extra layer to my talent and then my game. I would be at a higher level. So, with that, I'm also going to backtrack real quick, Ryan, because if I'm the Arizona Cardinals and I understand Kyler Murray doesn't study and that annoys the crap out of me, but look at what he's done in the league so far without studying. And I know it's not the supreme of the supreme, but I'm telling you, if this is what he can do, being cognizant, what can he do if he just puts in an extra 4 hours a week? We're not saying 4 hours a day, which, some players do. We're asking for 4 hours a week. How much better can he be from this point?
Genuinely, when you stop and think about it, and I'm going to give you a quote that I got today from one Cliff Kingsbury, because he did make reference to the Kyler Murray contract situation, and then he made a comparison between himself and Sean McVay, as we all know, a Super Bowl winning coach. I'm sure McVay's got me beat by a couple hundred hours this week. Yeah, McVay's won a Super Bowl. He's been to two. Cliff, you nearly lost your job at the end of last season, and you're hanging on to it by a thread. Those couple hundred hours make all the difference. Why are we acting so cavalier about this? The fact of the matter is, when you play in the National Football League, it's not the same as playing in Pop Warner, high school, or college. You can't get by on talent alone when everybody else is talented. If I'm 6'2" and I play basketball with 5-year-olds, I will dominate. I am 6'2". If I play with other people who are grown men, I will not get by solely on being 6'2". Kyler Murray, you are in the National Football League, the men's league as we like to call it. Why don't you act like you care about this?
And that's the sad part. He shouldn't be told to care about it. You should just care about it. This is your job. Like, even myself, I look at myself like when I'm in work mode, I care about work mode. But one of the things that makes me great at my job is that when I'm sitting at home I don't have that off switch. I'm thinking, hey, I did this at work. What if I did this? I want to check on this. I want to check on that. And that's just me at a normal, typical 9 to 5 job. And this guy is playing football, a game for a living, where I would absolutely love to just dive in, study game tape for a living, and do that day in and day out. And you know what? We all knew that this was coming. Not maybe that it was put into the contract like this, but you could tell. Because if you've seen over the last 3 seasons of Kyler Murray, what has been a knock between him and Cliff Kingsbury? And you talked about it. Sean McVay has hundreds and hundreds of hours over me. That's the difference, blah, blah, blah. We can tell because when you get to the late game, late seasons, fourth quarters, December games, there is a completely different Arizona Cardinals team out there, and there is a very different Kyler Murray playing out there. You take a look at his stats in the first and second quarter compared to the third and fourth quarter, or hell, if you even take a look at, games 1 through 6 in a season and then 7 through 17 now, you take a look at those differences, they are vastly different. He tends to have a lower touchdown to interception ratio, meaning one touchdown to basically one interception in the second half of a season compared to the first half of the season where it's like 2.5 to 1, and I don't have the numbers sitting right in front of me. But all the little things that go into details like third downs, late in game situations, trailing, second half of games, late in seasons where defenses are starting to figure you out and you need to start figuring out defenses. All those little things you can tell there has been no adjustment made by Kyler Murray nor Cliff Kingsbury. And now we know the answer. It's because they do their 9 to 5, and when they leave at 5 o'clock, they don't give a damn about anything else in life.
Zach, let me ask you this, and let me get your take on this. When you see Cliff Kingsbury say, I'm sure McVay's got me beat by a couple hundred hours, do you think it would be fair to say that the problem down there in Arizona is bigger than just Kyler? Is this a cultural problem down there where they're too cavalier as a team, relatively young head coach, and maybe the fact of the matter is that this might not be the right head coach for this team?
I'm curious to see, and obviously it's been several months, about 4 or 5 months, that since Cliff Kingsbury signed his extension. Did they decide to put something in his extension? Did they have this conversation with him? Because it starts at the top and works its way down to the bottom. We all know the trickle down theory. So if the people at the top, if the general manager is doing their job, if the head coach is doing their job, then the players should be expected to do their job. Now, if you're telling me if Cliff Kingsbury, the horse's mouth coming straight from his mouth, that he is getting outbeat in game film and game planning and this and that, that's not a good thing. Sean McVay once thought about retiring for a brief moment this offseason because he knows the hard work and dedication that he has to put in day after day, hour after hour to make a football team relevant and win big. He knows what it takes. Bill Belichick knows what it takes. These guys know what it takes. It means family time when you can get it, the off seasons, you're going to hit it hard. You're going to go on that month-long vacation to Cabo. But guess what? When it's between the football seasons, when you're ready to go, you need to be there, be aware, and basically live there. Now, not every coach does that, but every coach should do that. And unfortunately, this may be a bigger problem than Kyler Murray. And maybe Kyler Murray's just fitting in with the organization and what their standards are. But the standards need to be raised. And maybe, just maybe, the general manager that popped in and said, we're going to sign you this deal, we're raising the bar. We don't want to just be good. We don't want to just make the playoffs. We want to win a Super Bowl. That's the ultimate goal for any player. And if Kyler Murray truly cares about his brand and who he is and his legacy, he should want to win a Super Bowl. Because if you win a Super Bowl in Arizona, tell you what, comp that food everywhere you go.
Zach, as we all know here at Zach Harris Sports, statistics are quite like bikinis. They only reveal so much. But I have some statistics here that I think will illuminate this subject just a little bit. So if you don't mind, let me read you some numbers. What I have up here is the Kyler Murray statistics by month. Month of September, we're looking at 3 games, 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. October, we played 5 games. We scored 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. It's the beginning of the year where there might not be as much film on you and teams might not have had as much time to adjust. When we get to December and we play 4 games, we throw for 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Oh my, that's much worse. And then in January, in our 2 games, we threw 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, but only 3 touchdowns. And against our own division, over the course of 4 games, mind you, the teams that we play in our own division have had more time to adjust to us, have spent more time watching our film, and are probably much more adjusted. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. We also took 14 sacks. Just to give you a comp there, in 10 games outside of our own division, we only took 17 sacks. We also threw 20 touchdowns. So the more you delve into these, the more I believe the picture becomes clear. It's not just that you have this late season swoon as a Cardinal. It's the reason you're having it is because when other teams study and make adjustments, you're on Fortnite. You don't care enough to make the adjustments because you don't put in the work to figure out what those adjustments need to be. You have failed. You're not failing at the end of the year for no reason. You're failing due to your own fault. Now, when we take a look at all these numbers, stats don't tell a full picture, stop and consider the following. Games at the end of the year are higher leverage games. They matter. They feel more important because we're closer and closer to the playoffs. Is that a time of year where you want this guy checked out?
Not in my book.
What do you think, Zach?
Not in my book. So if you take a look, just to put this in perspective for you real quick, and like I said, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you go back and look at Tom Brady, just off my memory, I could tell you Tom Brady in the first, 6 games of the season, he has his ups and downs, his ebbs and flows. You could pretty much go through season by season and point to one game where he really just shit the bed early in the season. And then as we get further along in the season, he progressively gets better, especially in that middle part of that season, like the November timeframe, and then leading into December is really where he hits his stride. And then ultimately, we know playoff Brady. We all know that playoff Brady. So here's how I'm going to preface it before we move on, and I'll let you get the last word in, Ryan. But I'm going to tell you a great quote from my mom, and I'm sure a lot of moms across the board have said this. Everyone can see who you are when you're in front of them, but it's who you are when no one's looking that really matters. So I'm going to ask you right now, Kyler Murray, who are you when nobody's looking?
A great quote, Zach. If you stop and think about Kyler Murray as a whole, if you think back to February when he released that press release on Kyler Murray stationery through his agents and complained about the Cardinals organization and what he wanted. When you look at him, here's a guy who was a number 1 overall pick, went to a franchise who got him the hand-picked coach, gave him everything he could possibly want. He got what he wanted in his struggle for self. He was made king for a day, and I can promise you at the end of his career, when he has to go and look in the mirror, he's not going to like what he sees because he's going to be wasted potential. But when you look at Kyler Murray, who was the number 1 pick in that draft, you know who also got drafted in the same draft class, Zach? Daniel Jones.
That is right. Daniel Jones did get drafted in that same exact draft class. And now that we're in training camp and the rumors are spreading out about this player reporting to camp but not playing, this one, that one, who's going to be the number 1 starter, you take a look at my avatar. I got Trey Lance up as my avatar because it was announced yesterday. We all knew it, but it became, quote unquote, official when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan said, Trey Lance is our guy. We expect to be able to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. He just passed his physical yesterday afternoon. He had a little throwing session today. He's ready to be on the move. So I'm going to ask you this. This is how we're going to dive into it first. Daniel Jones, you're a Giants fan. If you have the opportunity right now before the season starts, before we get too far into OTAs, are you trying to make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, who is clearly available?
Giants fans, let's be honest with one another. This is a safe space. I think we can have a little group therapy. We have, in recent memory, been through such illustrious coaches like Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, Joe Judge, and now we move on to the glorious Brian Daboll. In that time period, we've had to transition from Eli Manning, who, for all the negative things we can say about him and his big, dumb, dopey face, did win 2 Super Bowls for the franchise, and I happen to have a great fondness for. When you look at Daniel Jones, and you can say he's had a terrible roster around him, his number one weapon on his offense is consistently hurt, and his coaching has been subpar to say the least. But what Daniel Jones has put on film is bad. And the worst thing you can be in sports isn't bad, it's mediocre. When you're mediocre, you don't get the draft picks that improve your franchise because the worst teams eat first, and you're not good enough to go to the playoffs and dance the dance with the others. Daniel Jones is never, ever, ever, ever going to be the guy that takes you to the dance. As many bad things as you can say about him, Jimmy G's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to the playoffs. He's proven that he can be a leader. He won't try to overdo it because, quite frankly, he can't. But he's not going to make those head-scratching interceptions. He's certainly not going to consistently fumble the football. He won't trip and fall in a primetime game that we'll have to watch every season for the rest of our lives.
2 times a season.
Stop, please. You're killing me. You're killing me. I'm sorry. I like Daniel Jones. I have nothing bad about the guy personally, but the fact of the matter is he's never going to be Eli Manning. He's never going to be a franchise quarterback. And if we stick it out with him, we franchise tag him, we let him hang around, we're never going to be better than mediocre. And once you're mediocre forever. It's me personally. If I can trade like a conditional 3rd rounder and you tell me we can, at least roll the dice on Jimmy G, I'm a gambling man. I'll take that gamble. Zach, you're the Giants, would you consider moving on now, or would you sit out the season and see what you got with DJ?
So this is a difficult question for me because I do like Jimmy G. He is very limited, but at the end of the day, he does win games. He does what he is asked to a T. Now, the way that this Giants roster is constructed, you have Kadarius Toney there. You got Kenny Galladay there. You just brought in a kid from Kentucky through the draft, Wendell Robinson, who is a speedster. You got Saquon Barkley there. So you have some playmakers there.
Don't forget Evan Neal.
And that's not a playmaker, though. That's a good guy that's going to solidify your line. But
I just love talking about Evan Neal.
I'm talking strictly position players, position players. Because when you take a look at what Jimmy G does best, he gets the ball out of his hands quickly. He puts it in the right position to get the guys that need the ball in their hands with space to move. And if you take a look at what he's done in San Francisco, yards after the catch, yak, baby. All about the yak. Now, you have some yak players on the Giants. So if you bring in a guy like Jimmy G, he would be able to run that offense very efficiently. He knows how to get the ball out of his hands quickly. He knows where to go with it quickly. He's not going to sit there and play around with it. He's going to do his job and then let the wide receivers or Saquon Barkley, if you get the ball in his hands, can make some moves and make some magic happen. If you can just do that, this automatically makes a team just that much better. And I think if you take a look at what Daniel Jones brings and what Jimmy G brings, Jimmy G is clearly an upgrade because if we're taking a look at all the starting quarterbacks in the league plus Jimmy Garoppolo, I would probably rank Daniel Jones right around 30th. And that's just me being honest. I do like his talent, but at the end of the day, if you look beyond the vanilla offense, the non creative offense, if you look beyond the injuries and the coaching, he's made the same mistakes repetitively over and over and over and over again. And if you're not getting that through your skull in year 4, I don't know if you're ever going to get that through your skull. Now, I do think if they end up sticking with him, I do think he's going to be tremendously better than what he was before. But that's not saying much because the bar is very low on him. I think it's just they're going to let it run out there. They're going to roll the ball out there, let it go this season, see where they fall in the draft. But I wouldn't be too surprised if they made a move for Jimmy G at the right cost. It has to be the right cost because if I believe so, the Giants have about 7 million left in cap space right now, so they would have to figure something out to make it work. Which obviously, if they bring in Jimmy G, they can sign him to like a 2-year extension, lower the cap hit for this year, and it can work out in their favor. But that's something they need to figure out. Do they think they have the pieces in place to move forward with a winning team now, or do they say, even though we really like what Jimmy G has, we're not right there as a roster in the whole. Let's just roll the ball out with Daniel Jones, see where it gets us, and maybe we can get a Will Levis from Kentucky or a Tyler Van Dyke from Miami or a Bryce Young from Alabama or a CJ Stroud from
Oh,
Ohio
yes,
State.
please.
Maybe we can get one of those top 4 guys. And who knows? Maybe the kid from Boston College produces enough to be considered at elite level. There's plenty of quarterbacks that could potentially enter the draft this year where you wouldn't have to reach for them because there's a lot of talent that's coming out of the college football world next year. Believe it or not, keep an eye on those 4 quarterbacks I named plus more because you got to remember guys like Spencer Rattler just transferred to South Carolina. He's looking to get his name back in there. The kid I mentioned from Boston College. There's a lot of talent at the college level that could potentially enter the NFL draft. So if the Giants want to play the long game and say, Daniel Jones, if you prove us wrong, maybe we do bring you back. But if not, we have the ability to draft potentially one of these top 4 quarterbacks. Now I'm going to bring it back to you. With that being said, with that top talent in the quarterback position in the next upcoming NFL draft, what would it take for Daniel Jones this season to show, hey, maybe I should get a new contract? Because obviously he can't get a contract extension. Didn't pick up the 5th-year option. So this is either it for the Giants or you sign him to a new contract. What would it take for him to come back on a new contract?
He's certainly got an uphill battle. The first thing you would have to see is a lot fewer balls that hit defenders in the chest, where you stop and go, oh, what? That's an interesting decision you've made. The other problem that he's consistently had is fumbles. Turnovers kill teams. And considering that although you're a pretty new face, you're still on your rookie deal, you've been around long enough, even just around the game of football as a quarterback, Daniel Jones, that you should know that turnovers kill your team. Stop, for God's sakes. He's got to show capacity to get the ball into the hands of his playmakers and let them do what they do best. All the pressure isn't on you as the quarterback, Daniel, because trust me, you got some pretty low expectations out here in Big Blue Nation. We want to see you get the ball to Saquon Barkley in space. Get it to Tony in space. Let them make plays. I don't expect you to make plays. Quite frankly, that's not your skill set. You need to show the capacity to learn from your mistakes, to get the ball where it needs to be in an offense and let other people make it happen. And don't try to lower your shoulder and run over a player in the secondary and get a concussion. Don't do that. Stop that. That is not who you are. That being said, me personally as a Giants fan, my big concern, the worst case scenario for this season is this. Daniel Jones shoots himself in the foot some, but the pieces around him, the coaching, the relatively soft schedule are enough to squeak out, if everything goes right, 8 wins. You find yourself maybe at 9 wins. You draft towards the middle of the pack. You miss the quarterback feeding frenzy. And it's very suddenly, instead of being the beginning of the night where all the pretty girls are still out and you kind of have your pick of the litter, it's now 2 a.m. The bartender's calling last call, and you're going to take a quarterback home just so you don't go home empty handed no matter what she looks like. That, to me, is the worst case scenario, where in spite of Daniel Jones, we get by. We win a couple games because we've got this shiny new head coach. The culture's changing. It's not as if there's no talent on this team. And now all of a sudden we found ourselves in the realm of mediocre teams who aren't bad enough to get much better, but we're not competing. Zach, do you think that's like a fair concern? You're a bit more removed from the situation. What do you think?
I do think that's a fair concern. So that's one of my nightmares for this Giants team is that they do enough to not do anything. And what I mean by that is exactly how you stated it. So they're not bad enough to get one of these high draft picks, but they're not good enough to make the playoffs and show, hey, Daniel Jones is the answer. You know, we didn't pick up the 5th-year option. We knew it was a risk. And guess what? He proved us wrong. So that's still a win for the Giants because, hey, now we know he is the answer. We just got to sign him to a new contract. Bada boom, bada bing, whatever. But if you get stuck in that realm of, 7 wins or whatever the case may be, you know, you got to look at the teams ahead of you. And then you got to remember there are also teams going into this next year's draft, a quarterback heavy draft, teams such as Miami, Seattle, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Houston Texans. That's just 4 teams I named right there. All 4 of them have potentially have question marks at the quarterback position. All 4 of those teams have 2 first-round picks going into next year. And I didn't even mention the Detroit Lions. So that's 5 teams that could potentially need quarterbacks that have not only teams that could fall into that position, but also have the draft capital to be able to move up and down that first round of the draft to put themselves in position if they need to get one of these elite level prospects. So that's what I find with the Giants. So that's why me and you had this discussion, at work and off air where I wanted the Giants to trade one of their 2 first round picks. Now, I love what they did. Evan Neal and Thibodeau. I love those 2 picks. But I was thinking for the future. If Daniel Jones isn't the answer, I wanted them to trade, if they could find a trade partner, one of these first round picks for a future first next year, meaning this coming NFL draft after the season, so they could put themselves in a prime position to either go out and draft one of these elite prospects or Lamar Jackson never worked out anything with Baltimore. What's it going to take to bring in Lamar Jackson, just to name somebody? Or Kyler Murray's situation. We didn't know at the time whether he was going to sign a contract extension or move on. What would it take to bring in a Kyler Murray because he is talented? They would have been able to put themselves in position to have options available. And my biggest fear is that they just do enough to not be able to do anything.
Boy, Zach, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with what they should have done in this past draft. And I'll be the first to admit, I spent that entire evening, and Zach will attest to this, screaming from the rooftops, take Neal, fix your line, fix your line, fix your line. But retrospectively, you needed draft capital for next year. you need to get yourselves in the position where you have insurance on what are we going to do when Daniel's Daniel for another year. Danny Dimes is probably closer to Danny Pennies, and you needed that insurance for the following year because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're scrambling trying to find a replacement. Next year, for as rich of a quarterback draft as it is, Zach, just like you said, the Giants are going to be the only team looking for one. And if you don't make a move on Jimmy G now when he goes somewhere else and he's under contract and you miss that boat, you can't extend Daniel. Heaven forbid you have to franchise tag this man. He sticks it to you so bad that you end up getting stuck with him. I mean, you're living life on a razor's edge. It's not a great position, at least sitting here right now talking about it. You can't feel super comfortable about the Giants quarterbacks. I mean, we look at in the division, Jalen Hurts has a big opportunity this season to silence his critics. He's got a pretty solid roster around him, and it's a team, lest we forget, made the playoffs. The Cowboys are the Cowboys, and for as bad as their head coaches, they have a fantastic roster full of young players, and I think overall they're a very solid team, and the Commanders aren't worth wasting breath on. But when you look at the Giants' position, you're kind of in no man's land. What are we going to do? It's scary. It's a scary spot to be in if you're a fan of this franchise because you've suffered for a pretty good stretch here where things haven't gone our way. And when you look to the future, there's possibility for more on the other side. But all that being said, doom and gloom over, we got Brian Daboll, baby. We got 2 linemen in this draft. We got an edge rusher on the defensive side. Maybe Saquon will finally figure it out, stop dancing in the hole, and just hit the hole when we need him to. Maybe the culture will be different. We got rid of Dave Gettleman. Oh my God, happy day. Maybe I'm wrong. I would love to be cold takes exposed. Daniel Jones kills it. This team turns it around, but I'm not betting the house on it. Zach, if you were the Giants today and you had to make one move, what do you do? Do you stick with Daniel Jones right now, let it ride, or do you go out, do you get Jimmy G right now and see what you can do with him?
Oh, man. That is a tough question. I'm going to go ahead and let it ride. I'm going to let it ride. I'm going to see what we do, see if Daniel Jones can prove us wrong. And if he doesn't, then we'll figure it out when we get there. You know, maybe if you go back to the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of years ago when they tried to get in position to draft Carson Wentz, who they thought was going to end up being their franchise guy. Obviously, we won't get into that because that's a whole nother podcast. We could spend a whole nother podcast just on Carson Wentz himself. But the Eagles, what they were able to do in maneuvering, and I know a lot of people say, oh, they gave up a lot. But what they gave up to move up to the number 2 pick from where they were, and if you remember, originally they were in the high teens. So they were in the 16 to 19 range. I can't remember exactly. They made a trade with Miami. They moved up to like the 10 or 11 spot, and then they jumped obviously to number 2 spot with the Browns. And then if you look and see what they did by trading Sam Bradford to the Vikings and being able to do that, they really recuperated a lot of those picks. So I think the Giants need to roll it out. If Daniel Jones proves them wrong, you know, hallelujah, we got our franchise guy. If he doesn't prove them wrong, you know, you just hope, you know, you fall in that. Realistically, you would like to get in a position to get one of these top 4 guys in the upcoming draft if Daniel Jones isn't the guy. But if you are in that 10 to 16 range, it is doable. It is manageable to move up because if guys like the Jacksonville Jaguars finish in front of you, you know, they have their quarterback right now. As of right now, they believe they have their quarterback. If the Jets finish ahead of you, and I'm talking about in the lottery, and not the lottery, but the NFL draft, These are teams that are not looking for quarterbacks. So it all depends on who falls in front of you and who you can make a deal with and what they're looking for. But it is possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the ball out, let it lie for this season, and then worry about it in the offseason and with a game plan in mind where, this is what we have to offer. These are the teams in front of us in the draft. And how high do we need to make it to get one of these four guys that we really like, that we've been doing our homework on all season long?
The nightmare scenario for the draft, if we were going to set up the worst possible order for the Giants to be staring at to try to maneuver, would look something like Seattle 1, and then we'll follow that up with Houston 2, and then maybe we sprinkle in a little, I don't know, Atlanta. Maybe something goes terribly off the rails. You see a team like Tennessee that's kind of high up there. Maybe things go off the rails. Now they start looking at, hey, maybe we can steal a quarterback high. It's a lot of it's going to be out of your hands, and you're going to be at the mercy of who's ahead of you and what's available. Now, there have been pretty good quarterbacks that weren't taken at the top of the draft. I mean, Patrick Mahomes wasn't a number one. Josh Allen wasn't a number one, and Giants fans, he was taken after Saquon. Good luck getting to sleep tonight. It's certainly possible that something could fall into your laps, and if you evaluate right and your scouting's on point, you can get your franchise quarterback. I'm not saying that it's not possible. It's just you're creating a situation where it becomes increasingly more difficult. And me personally, I would like to see this thing start to turn around. I would like to get this sour taste finally out of my mouth and compete. We haven't even been competitive in the worst division in football. I mean, if you think back a few years, we had that terrible fiasco where the Eagles punted away the last game of the season to get a better pick. Oh, they should have played better. The Giants could have made the playoffs. You had no business being in that conversation. You were terrible. Terrible. You're not a competitive team. You had no business being there. You haven't been competitive for a while. And a really quick way to get better is to be drafting at the top end of the draft, making the correct choices, and then starting to put young players into those spots, watching them grow, and then have everything come together at the right time. It's hard in sports to build something without tearing something completely down. Very hard. So, Giants fans, enjoy the season. Maybe things go our way and we have a nice, fun ride where we win some games and the team looks good. Saquon looks like Saquon and Daniel Jones stops being Daniel Jones. But just keep in the back of your mind, there's a year after this and a year after that. Maybe these aren't guys we want to be married to as much as we just want to have a fling with for one season. That being said, Zach, I'm going to ask you my big question that's been on my mind. Do not break my heart with this answer. Who finishes last in this division? Washington or New York? NFC East, who's in the cellar?
There's only one answer, and I know you don't want to hear it. If I take a look at the teams, Cowboys, they have tremendous talent. Dak is a above average quarterback. He's going to get you some wins. The Eagles have done a tremendous job adding talent. They really put the pieces around Jalen to help him succeed. That defense is going to get better with a second-year defensive coordinator. The Washington Commanders, yeah, that sounds weird saying, but they have a great coach. They are finally establishing some culture. They got good defensive pieces. They got off to a slow start defensively last year, and you've seen what they were able to do with Taylor Heineke. And I'm going to tell you right now, you may not like Carson Wentz. You may not like the egregious plays that he has sometimes, but if you take a look at what Taylor Heineke is and what Carson Wentz is, Carson Wentz I would take 100 times over, plus 2 on Tuesday. That's how much I believe in Carson Wentz over Taylor Heineke. And then I look at the New York Giants, and I'm just sorry. They do have some pieces there. It's a first-year head coach. You're going to get a first-year offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. Daniel Jones has just not shown anything. Saquon Barkley, although he'll be another year removed from injury, just continues to show that he's that bounce around, looking for the home run type of guy. And the number one concern is health. Can everybody stay healthy? Can Kenny Galladay stay healthy? Can Daniel Jones stay healthy? Can Evan Neal stay healthy? Can Saquon Barkley stay healthy? Can these guys stay healthy? Ultimately, the Giants finish last.
My heart is broken. My spirit is broken. But, like I said, being mediocre is worse than being bad. And we could build something great if we tear down what we have. That being said, Zach, I will be the first to tell you this. You have broken me. I think on that note, we need to end the show so I can cry. I will not cry on this podcast, but I will cry when we end it.
All right. So for you Giants fans out there, I do not want to end it on a sour note. I will tell you, go check the Giants social media page. See if you can find it. There is a sweet catch in the corner of the end zone by Kadarius Toney with a DB draped all over him. So I don't want to end this on a sour note. Go check out that video. And then good night all. Let it savor. Enjoy that catch because it might just be the best catch you have all season.
Talking Giants on Twitter has a lot of videos from camp. If you're a Giants fan, give that a look at. Those are some great guys over there at Talking Giants. Also, from us here at Zach Harris Sports Incorporated, thank you so much for tuning in this week. As always, we come at you once a week. We talk about football. We spend the entire show only discussing football. We're so happy to have you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and maybe next week it'll be a little more positive. Maybe we'll finally get to those NFC Power Rankings, and you'll find out how low I have the Packers and Cardinals. Who knows?
Guess you'll have to find out next Wednesday at 9 o'clock. Have a good night, y'all.
Keep tuning in.